And welcome back to Community Viewpoint. I'm John Pawlak, your host for this segment. We have the good fortune of having with us today for this segment someone who I've known for quite a few years here in Nye County. He's the planning director for Nye County, Darrell Lacy. And I was just looking through the Pahrump Valley Times today, and because of some of the things that Darrell does, he's just about on every page for some of the hats that he wears. I wear a lot of hats, but mine are all for volunteer. You have official hats that actually you make things happen, or you're the person where the buck stops with you. So we're going to be talking, first of all, because something that just happened recently was the election. And the Senate has gone Republican, and by that happening, there's a chance that Yucca Mountain will become funded once again. The Yucca Mountain, tell us what Yucca Mountain is.
Well, for those of you who have forgotten or new in the Pahrump
we were just
Nye
talking
County,
about that. Yeah.
It hasn't been in the news a lot lately because the Congress, primarily because of Harry Reid, has not been funding Yucca Mountain for the last 3 or 4 years. The law is still the same. Mm-hmm. Yucca Mountain is still the designated site for a nuclear waste repository. Mm-hmm. We were just starting the licensing process when the funding was pulled for it. And after the funding was pulled, then the Obama administration shut down the offices in Vegas, laid off 2,700 people, including a few hundred of them in Nye County, and essentially padlocked the site out there. However, with the election where the Republican Senate is there are a lot of folks cautiously optimistic that we can get back to the licensing process and hopefully find out once and for all, is it going to be safe? The licensing process gives all the different parties an opportunity to weigh in with their concerns, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will make a final decision as to whether it's safe.
Well, before coming out here, I lived in a place called Lamont, Illinois, where all this began with Enrico Fermi. We went from Chicago, he went to the Red Gate Woods, then he went to Argonne National Laboratories. That's where I lived. So
okay.
I'm coming out here to Pahrump, to just south of the Nevada test site where Yucca Mountain is. And I says, is it going to be safe with this Yucca Mountain? That was in the pre-EIS environmental impact statements back then. So I went to our local library in town, and they had a whole stack of books over there. So I did all my homework on it. The librarian at the time, I says, hey, I can't spend all this time at the library. Can I take them home? He says, yeah, then nobody else reads them. So I was intent on finding if this place was safe for me to come. And well, I'm here. My mistake, I should have understood what was happening at that test site. Those are more issues for me than the Yucca Mountain because of the above ground and underground tests. If there's anything that would happen in the future, it would be because of that.
Within the foreseeable future, yes, because the contamination from the weapons program is actually in the soil and the groundwater today. When you look at the questions about Yucca Mountain, the material is going to be in 3-inch thick stainless steel and alloy canisters that will protect it for many hundreds of thousands of years before it even has the potential of having the first drop leak out. So I mean, it's studied, and the analysis that's been done by DOE and the National Labs is for 1,000,000-year safety.
Right, and that's why I felt safe coming out here, because I did all those studies and I understood what they did, and I understood the process they used for the safety. And why would you be involved with the Nevada test site underground, and above ground? Because you're with another one of your hats is?
Well, I mean, as far as the Nuclear Repository Project Office,
which I always get
which primarily was looking at Yucca Mountain, but it also interacts with DOE on the test site for their, because they also have a low-level waste disposal facility also. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the weapons program, so it's not a facility that's ever going to be turned back to the local people. It's a lot of contamination out there. It's going to be kept isolated for many thousands of years because of the contamination that's there. So it, from one aspect, it is not that bad a spot to at least be studying for a site like Yucca Mountain.
And what you oversee is there are a whole bunch of wells, probably Was it hundreds?
Well, when the funding was going on, Nye County, as the site county for Yucca Mountain, was receiving funding from Department of Energy to do our own independent science. We, very early on determined that if there ever was going to be contamination leaving the test site, it would be through the water tables. So we focused our own science program on water. So we have 50 plus wells in the area downstream of Yucca Mountain. We call it our early warning drilling program, but since the first drop of contamination might not leave the site for a few 100,000 years, it's very early in its warning program. But it's we know a lot about the water out there, and at least when we had funding, we had quite a few experts on staff. We have a couple of them left.
Yes, so that's funding problems. And this is a different basin too. Our water comes from the Spring Mountains, and
Yeah, the water in Pahrump comes from the Spring Mountains.
This is important, yes.
The Yucca Mountain water eventually goes over and gets into the Amargosa River and goes towards Death Valley.
Right, and here's a side view of Yucca Mountain. This is what it looks like on top. And some of the tunnels that have been drilled in blue, there's a big circle, that's the north and the south portal. And there are some of the side tunnels that were put in there for different testing. The heat test that was
Right,
completed.
The spent fuel that comes from the nuclear reactors is hot. So when it's put in the mountain, it's going to heat up the mountain. And so they did a heater test, essentially using a mock-up of a fuel canisters with electric heaters in it to kind of show what's going to happen with the rock and the moisture in the rock when it's heated up.
So a lot of this was, almost all of it, when I was there, was all very transparent. And the science was there, but evidently politics trumps science.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so I should understand that now. And it's, I enjoyed my 4.5 years with the project, bringing people out there, explaining to them. And the people that came out there were very open-minded. They came into my office and came out on the tours. And they were spoken to by DOE experts, the United States Geological Survey. The folks were over there. They had trouble speaking between meters and feet, so we always asked them to interpolate for us. Hey, speak in English.
Well, if funding comes back, the first thing that's going to happen is the licensing process, and it'll be probably a 3, maybe 4-year process before we get the final word that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission thinks it can be done safely, and then if that's the case, then Congress is going to have to pass laws to construct it. So it's not going to be open for at least another 15 years.
So otherwise it would have
More
been
like
open?
20, yeah.
It would have been open?
Well, initially it was planned to be open in 1998, and that's
Right.
one of the
dates,
issues that you deal with from a financial perspective is even though Congress has not been funding the studies on Yucca Mountain, all of the nuclear utilities have sued Department of Energy because they had a legal requirement to take the waste by 1998. So they're a few years behind schedule. They don't even have a plan right now, unless they do come back and fund Yucca Mountain. And so several of them took them to court, won judgments against the federal government for not taking the waste, and the us taxpayers are paying about $500 million a year to the electric utilities for failure of the federal government to live up to their obligations.
So there. Like I said, the politics trumps science, and it's very unfortunate, but we're moving, hopefully we will
Well, I think
move
we're
forward.
cautiously optimistic that funding will come back and we
Yes.
can at least get back into the licensing process.
And stay tuned, we'll have more on this, and you'll read about it in the newspapers as these things develop. So hopefully the politicians will come to their senses, and I'm sure not everybody's going to agree with you and myself also about the safety of Yucca Mountain. There's issues with transportation, and there's issues that people bring up, but to me, this is the best case scenario for the nuclear waste.
Well, when you consider that the existing utilities are storing it on site today, And there's like 150 million people within 75 miles of those reactors. Most of them are sitting on bodies of water because they use lots of cooling water. So you got waste sitting within 100 yards of Lake Michigan, for instance.
Right.
In a dry mountain in the desert, it's probably a much better spot than Lake Michigan for.
Right,
Yeah.
and people say this isn't a high earthquake area, but basically, no, I've been here. I've only been through one. It was about 8 or 10 years ago, and that started at Joshua Tree.
Well, and it's designed to handle
Yes.
earthquakes. It's
Those
hard rock mountain.
Yes, that's been taken into consideration also. And what else is in the news that you'd like to bring forward to this in this paper?
Well, let's see. What do you want to talk about?
The Last Chance?
No, Last Chance Park. As part of our planning and natural resources jobs, we've been trying to help the town of Pahrump identify a site. With the delays that they had with BLM, we found another site that they could use. That was some county-owned land. Mm-hmm. But I think they finally have mended their ways with BLM, at least on this site. And the town board, I understand this week, voted to go back to the original site and move forward with the BLM R&PP lease, recreation and public purpose lease. Another thing, I guess, that's been a hot topic this week is the resource management plan, the RMP, that BLM has a draft RMP on the street, it's called. This is something that's been in the works now for almost 4 years, I think. Mm-hmm. Nye County has been what's called a cooperating agency on this. So Nye County staff has been attending all of the meetings with BLM and other interested governmental entities. So we don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that they're putting in there, but we have a process to comment on it. They're working through what's called NEPA.
Right.
And under the NEPA process, they have to now come out with their draft resource management plan for comments. Everybody has the ability to do your own individual comments. When they do have a hearing here in town, there'll be a court reporter there, so you can leave them comments through the court reporter. You can issue written comments. But the county commission will be issuing formal comments to them. And I don't think that we'll be real happy with some of the proposed ACECs either.
Okay, so we're out of time, and the last meeting didn't happen, so keep abreast with that. So we'll see you next week, and thank you for watching. Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.